Before the world plunged fully into war, Britain liked to believe it understood modern conflict. It pointed to its Spitfires, its destroyers, and its long military tradition as evidence that it was ready for whatever came. But beneath the confidence lay a quieter, more dangerous truth. Britain's artillery, the backbone of any army, could not move fast enough for a modern war. Guns that fired miles into the horizon were stuck crawling across fields at the pace of a farm cart. Heavy tractors from the First World War era struggled with soft ground, refused to climb gradients, and lacked the power to reposition guns under fire. And an immobile gun in the coming war was a dead gun. Germany had already committed itself to mechanization. Its artillery rolled forward behind half-tracks, purpose-built tractors, and a logistics system designed for speed. Britain, by comparison, had reliability in its guns but not in the vehicles meant to pull them. The British Expeditionary Force learned this the hard way in France. Guns abandoned, positions lost not because of inferior firepower but because the equipment could not move in time. This was the contrast the war exposed, between the weapons nations celebrated and the machines they relied on in silence. Britain needed something it had never truly invested in. A vehicle designed not for glory but for endurance, something powerful enough to haul a 6-ton gun, stable enough to carry a crew and ammunition, and rugged enough to travel across sand, chalk, mud, and rutted tracks without complaint. It needed a workhorse, not a showpiece. And unexpectedly, the answer would come from a company better known for building buses. Associated Equipment Company, AEC, was famous for London's red buses, not battlefield machinery. Yet in the late 1930s, when the War Office issued its requirement for a modern artillery tractor, AEC offered something different. Engineering that valued torque over speed, simplicity over elegance, and reliability over complexity. Their design did not promise glamour. Promised movement, steady, consistent, dependable movement. When the first prototypes appeared, they were unremarkable to the untrained eye. A boxy cab, a purposeful stance, a four-wheel drive system that looked almost oversized beneath the wooden bodywork. But to those who understood what modern war would demand, the machine was something else entirely. Here was a diesel-powered platform with the pulling power of a small locomotive, a winch capable of recovering not only itself but other vehicles, and the ground grip needed to drag a gun where it needed to be, when it needed to be there. Britain did not know it then, but this unassuming tractor, the AEC Matador, would become the quiet revolution behind its wartime mobility. And before long, it would prove that the machines no one celebrated often shaped battles far more than the ones that stole the spotlight. The AEC Matador did not emerge from a moment of inspiration or a single brilliant sketch. It came from a slow-building realization inside the War Office. Britain could not afford another conflict fought at the pace of the last one. If the artillery was to remain relevant, it needed a vehicle that could move guns before the battlefield moved past them. And so, in 1938, the requirement was circulated, a call for a 4x4 artillery tractor with a strong diesel engine, a large crew body, enough stability to haul heavy guns, and a low-range pulling power that would not fade under strain. AEC answered the call with the confidence of a company that had spent decades refining reliability. Their buses ran through London's winters, summers, and endless congestion. They were designed to start every morning without complaint and carry weight far beyond what the public ever considered. That experience, simple design, rugged engineering, dependable diesel systems, became the quiet foundation of the Matador. The design team did not chase speed. They chased torque. The AEC 7.7-liter diesel engine offered modest horsepower, but horsepower was not what moved a gun across soft ground. What mattered was pulling power at low revs, a characteristic the Matador delivered with unusual confidence. The four-wheel drive system, developed during a time when such systems were still far from common, gave it the ability to claw into earth, mud, or sand without spinning itself into exhaustion. Trials began quietly. On test grounds, the Matador heaved a 25-pounder gun up slopes that had defeated earlier tractors. It crossed chalk ridges without bogging down. When mired, the onboard winch bolted directly to the chassis, not as an afterthought, hauled the vehicle forward with the calm certainty of a machine built to solve its own problems. Officers who watched the trials understood immediately. Here was a tractor that didn't just meet the requirement. it expanded it. Yet what stood out most was the vehicle's philosophy of construction. There was no delicate engineering, no overcomplicated solutions. Its cab was wooden because wood could be repaired anywhere by anyone. Its chassis was over-engineered because a breakdown in battle was more dangerous than extra weight on the production line. Every angle, every bracket, every plate mirrored the same idea: reliability first. It was not glamorous. It was not elegant. But a war was coming that would be defined not only by firepower, but by the ability to move firepower. And the Matador, without fanfare, was ready to become the machine Britain did not yet realize it depended on. The AEC Matador's true story did not begin on the battlefield. It began on factory floors, places where Britain waged its parallel war of production. At AEC's Southall plant, the air changed the moment mobilization orders came through. The steady rhythm of peacetime work gave way to the urgent pulse of wartime industry. Steel arrived in larger quantities, schedules tightened, and the pace of assembly increased. Not recklessly, but with a precision driven by necessity. Britain could not match Germany's tank output, but it could build the vehicles that kept its guns alive. Inside the vast workshops, men and women, many new to heavy industry, stepped into roles reshaped by war. Women machined components, assembled electrical fittings, stitched cab interiors, and applied paint with the same steady discipline that had once kept London buses running. Every Matador built was a contribution to survival, a statement of collective responsibility rather than personal heroism. It was industrial mobilization at its most focused, thousands of hands shaping a single purpose. The Matador itself was ideal for wartime production. Its wooden cab could be constructed without draining steel reserved for ships and aircraft. Its chassis, though robust, relied on proven engineering rather than experimental designs that slowed production. Standardized parts meant repairs could be made from a common pool of components across units. And because its diesel engine was the same type used in many AEC buses, mechanics across Britain already understood it before the first Matador reached the front. As demand increased, production spread. Other manufacturers contributed subassemblies, bodywork, and modifications. The RAF commissioned its own variants, fuel tankers and Queen Mary tractor units for towing aircraft and long trailers. These shared the same reliable DNA, proving that the Matador's design was flexible enough to support roles far beyond artillery towing. Factory life reflected this adaptability. Chassis arrived in one hall while engines were tested in another, each process marked by an efficiency that grew sharper as the war progressed. The soundscape was a blend of hammer strikes, engine roars, welding arcs, and shouted instructions over machinery, an industrial orchestra performing without pause. By mid-war, Britain had produced thousands of Matadors, enough to supply not only home forces but multiple overseas theaters. What emerged from these factories was more than a vehicle. It was a physical embodiment of a national effort, simple enough to build in quantity, strong enough to survive the harshest environments, and reliable enough to carry Britain's artillery doctrine on its back. The industrial war Britain fought inside its own borders shaped the Matador into the machine that would soon prove indispensable across deserts, mountains, and mud-soaked fields. And once these vehicles left the factory gates, they entered a very different world. One where their endurance would be tested under conditions no engineer could fully replicate. When the AEC Matador rolled out of Britain's factories and onto the world's battlefields, it entered an environment far harsher than anything it had faced in trials. Yet it was in these extremes, in deserts that swallowed weaker vehicles, in mud that trapped entire columns, and in mountain passes where engines strained against gravity, that the Matador proved its worth beyond expectation. Its first and perhaps most defining test came in North Africa, where warfare depended on movement across open landscapes, and where artillery was only as valuable as the vehicle that could position it. In the western desert, the Matador found its natural arena. The wide sand plains demanded torque rather than speed, and the Matador's low-revving diesel engine delivered exactly that. It hauled 25-pounder guns across terrain that baked under the sun and shifted under the wind. Where lighter tractors overheated or bogged down, the Matador advanced steadily, its wide tires distributing weight evenly enough to keep traction. During the build-up to the Second Battle of El Alamein, mobility became decisive. not only in deploying guns, but in rapidly relocating them to counter German fire. The Matador did not fire those shells, but without it, the guns would not have reached their firing positions in time. From desert heat, the war shifted to the rain and mud of northwest Europe. In Normandy, the Bocage country tested a different strength: the ability to maneuver through narrow lanes, churned fields, and persistent mud. Here, the Matador's four-wheel drive system mattered more than ever. It dragged anti-tank guns into hedgerow gaps, positioned field artillery behind natural cover, and pulled other vehicles free when their wheels spun uselessly in soft ground. The winch became an indispensable tool, not only for self-recovery but for extracting trucks, guns, and even armored vehicles that had become immobilized. The Matador was not glamorous, but it provided a kind of quiet certainty. Where it went, the guns followed. Further south, in Italy, the vehicle met its most punishing test: mountains. The steep inclines and narrow passes demanded controlled power delivery, engine braking, and unshakable stability. Many vehicles struggled to haul guns up the Apennines. The Matador, built for torque rather than speed, ascended with measured persistence. On descents, its engine held back weight that might have overwhelmed a lesser machine. In these regions, artillery placement often meant the difference between holding a ridge or losing it, and the Matador made such placements possible. Across every theater, one truth held: battles were shaped not solely by firepower but by the ability to move firepower. The AEC Matador never gained fame for its contributions, but it was present at every key moment where mobility dictated advantage. It became the unspoken partner of every British artillery unit, a machine relied upon not because it dazzled, but because it never failed. And when the fighting ceased, the Matador's service to Britain did not end. Its next chapter would unfold not in war, but in the nation's slow, difficult return to peace. When the guns fell silent in 1945, Britain faced a different kind of struggle. Cities needed rebuilding, industries needed restarting, and an exhausted population needed the means to pull a nation back onto its feet. Thousands of vehicles stood in depots and airfields, machines built for a war that had finally ended. Among them were the Matadors. Dusty, scarred, worn by years of desert heat, European winters, and mountain passes. Yet, unlike many wartime designs that were too specialized for peace, the Matador possessed something rare: usefulness that extended far beyond the battlefield. As the government sold surplus equipment, the Matador became one of the most sought-after vehicles on the civilian market. Farmers saw a machine strong enough to pull plows, trailers, and timber. Forestry companies recognized its winch as a powerful tool for dragging logs through uneven woodland. Road haulage firms valued its durability on rough tracks and unpaved roads. Even fairground operators purchased ex-military Matadors, converting them into transport units for rides, tents, and heavy equipment. The qualities that made it an ideal artillery tractor, torque, reliability, and simplicity, made it just as effective in civilian life. Its wooden cab, once chosen for ease of wartime repair, proved practical for post-war modifications. Owners replaced panels, extended roofs, added storage compartments, and adapted bodies to suit local needs. Many Matadors were rebodied entirely, receiving custom-built load beds, crane mounts, or recovery equipment. The chassis, over-engineered for war, handled every new role without complaint. For many small businesses in post-war Britain, a single Matador could replace multiple vehicles simply because it could do so many jobs without breaking. In rural areas, stories began to accumulate. Farmers spoke of Matadors pulling loads that modern trucks stalled under. Loggers praised the vehicle's ability to traverse muddy slopes that would stop lighter lorries cold. Mechanics admired its straightforward engineering. Parts could be swapped, repaired, or fabricated locally. For many, the Matador became more than surplus equipment. It became a trusted partner in rebuilding livelihoods. Even decades later, long after newer designs emerged, many Matadors remained in service. Some ran into the 1960s, others into the 1970s, and a few continued working well into the 1980s in remote or specialized roles. The fact that a wartime tractor could serve nearly half a century spoke volumes about the philosophy that created it. But the Matador's legacy did not end in the industries it strengthened. Over time, As veterans grew older and wartime memories became history, another transformation began. One that returned the vehicle to the hands of those who valued its story as much as its strength. Today, the surviving Matadors sit in museums, private collections, and quiet barns, each one a reminder that wars are not won only by the machines people remember, but by the ones that simply did their job every day. The AEC Matador never fired a round, never led a charge, and never appeared in propaganda posters. Yet it moved the guns that shaped battles, pulled the weight that armies depended on, and carried a nation's hopes long after the war ended. Its legacy is not measured in destruction, but in endurance, proof that the quietest machines often leave the deepest mark. If you enjoyed this documentary-style breakdown, make sure to subscribe, leave a like, and tell us in the comments which unsung World War II machine you want us to cover next. Your support helps us bring more forgotten history back into the light.